Hey, this is Madalyn
and Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Let's jump in with the biggest news of the last week, Madalyn. While I was off hobnobbing at the podcast show, Elon hosted a live stream with Ron DeSantis.
He sure did. I mean, this was like a big deal to have a live stream with a governor here in the U.S., and it was being used as a first, which was utilizing spaces to announce a presidential campaign. I mean, that in itself, I thought was pretty cool. Like, what an interesting way of utilizing spaces. I think Elon is coming up with interesting ways of putting out really great audio content. I was wondering how many people would show up, and I made my way into it when it was live, probably about 20 minutes or so after I believe it had started. I was in another space, and so I made my way over, and there was silence, and I thought it was so odd. I'm like, what's going on? And I realized, it's crashing, and then I started paying more attention to the feed and see what people were talking about, and everybody was having trouble hearing it. So they definitely had a bunch of technical difficulties in the end, but when this part of it happened, there was like 700,000 live listeners. Could you imagine having 700,000 people right here live with us right now, and we're having tech issues and people can't hear us?
I mean, I'm always quite happy if we have 7. So, 700,000, hey, bring it on.
Right. So I was kind of like a little nervous for them, like, I mean, isn't that like the worst nightmare? Like, in radio, they said, don't ever have silence. You don't want that dead silence. It's always like the worst thing.
Yeah, you don't want silence on radio over here, because if it flicks over so many seconds, you end up with either a backup CD, which generally used to be like, if you heard Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis at the radio station, you knew you were off air, because it wasn't on the playlist. It was just there in case we got dead air. So I don't know. This has got a lot to it, though, isn't it? Don't you think that someone somewhere might have just sort of checked the stability of spaces before they launched into something like this, quite so huge?
I would have figured. I would have thought for sure, like, but hold on, though. How many engineers are working there right now? We don't know. It's not as many as it once was. So maybe something got overlooked. But the good news, they worked it out. And I was hoping, because when it completely crashed and they're like, okay, we got to just end this, I was like, I hope they start over. Like, it was a lot. They had the attention of a lot of people. And when I was in the space while it was crashing, there were huge names in there. People in politics, celebrities, I mean, who's who, big brands. A lot of people were there to check this out. I don't think that it really mattered which side of the left or right people were on, but the fact that this was a first utilizing spaces, an audio-only platform, to do something like this for somebody to announce their presidency. So I was intrigued and just wanted to see, like, okay, how are they going to do this, and what kind of information are they going to share? I was just really, it was a whole out of curiosity for me. I'm glad that they did start over, and they ended up having over 4 million listens since this space happened last week. What were your thoughts when you saw that they had done this and they had a lot of listens like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of, it's, to me, politicizing spaces in this way might not be such a good thing. Like, this feels like a whole different route for spaces, and it feels like we could see a whole different load of content that could come out of this. And, obviously Elon's hosted this space and has had DeSantis as his guest. Does he do that for all the candidates? I very much doubt it. And so where does that kind of put spaces in terms of like the political system and the whole, campaigning? And I know it's very different over in the US, but still, I still think that's kind of problematic. So seeing that many people in a space from a spaces point of view, amazing. That's like apparently 4 million people that know spaces exists, or maybe not, because there's another story we're going to come up on later on around whether or not everybody in a space is really a person. So yeah, great. I mean, spaces didn't, clearly the actual infrastructure didn't handle it very well. and it was unstable, as we've already said. I mean, what was happening, Madalyn? Was it freezing, or was it kicking the host out, or was it, what was kind of, or did it just stop for everybody? And then 4 million people were like looking at each other going, well, where do we go next?
That's what it seemed to be. I really came in right at the end before they just stopped the whole thing. And I couldn't hear anybody. Nobody was talking. I'm like, well, this is really odd. It was just dead space. But then I'm like, let me see what people are talking about. And everybody was complaining. And plus the chat in the space, I was looking at that as well to see, like, what are people saying? And yeah, and there was just a lot of confusion, like, what's going on? Why is this not working? Many times we think that we're the problem, right? Like, oh, something must be wrong. My internet's not working. My phone's not working. The app is messed up. You always think it's something on your end. But I was really just on there for a few minutes before Elon stopped it completely. But what's interesting is that it does seem a little bit of a leaning towards one political party, because all we hear about is people utilizing spaces on the Republican side. I don't really hear much about it on the Democrat side. I don't like that Twitter and Elon, it feels like they are taking sides. I just hope it just doesn't turn into a big thing like that as we get closer to the next election. I really hope everything stays neutral. I want to be neutral when we talk about it. I mean, I definitely have my views, but this is not the place to talk about it.
We've always seen that politics has gone down well on Spaces, whether that's debate around it or, we've seen in different countries where Spaces have cropped up and the topic has been political. Generally, they draw in really, really big numbers. But yeah, my fears are the same as yours. I'm not sure how neutral it can, how it can sustain a neutrality when you've got Elon kind of hosting and deciding who goes, live and on his account, as it were. When, we know he draws the crowds. Of course he draws the crowds. We've seen that already from him hosting Spaces. So it's concerning, I think, for the political process. And I'm not sure where it's going to go next.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how it all plays out. But what was interesting is I came across this tweet yesterday from Matt Navarra, and the headline was like really grabbed me. It said, Twitter cut key software before DeSantis audio glitch. I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting. Now, it's an article from The Information, and the Information is pretty awesome, but they have a paywall to see their articles. I've done their newsletter. They had it free for a while, like a year and a half ago. Great. But then once they put the paywall, it's pretty pricey to get access. But the thing is, the reason why I wanted to share this tweet anyway is that when you do click on the article, they'll give you like the first paragraph and a half, so you can get a little bit of the meat out of what this article is about. And I found it interesting that this article is saying that, when they hosted this, that they don't know for sure what the exact reason why they had the issues that they did. But it did mention that the company several weeks ago stopped paying for special software that handles high traffic internet services, including for the app's live audio feature. And I'm like, okay. And that's just in the first paragraph, which you can access on this article, which public can access. So I'm thinking, okay, sounds interesting. That makes me not surprised.
I mean, it's just a teaser, a taster of what that article might go into. But yeah, I mean, that's surely got to have something to do with it if that's the case. It just seems crazy to me that they wouldn't tech check it, that they wouldn't, double down on the stability of it. I mean, did they just not think it would be popular? In which case, what was the point? It's just not been thought through. But then has Elon ever spun up a space that we've felt has been thought through yet? Really?
Exactly. So, yeah, very interesting for sure. You would have think that they would have fully planned this out, expecting possibly millions of people live tuning in. It was such a big deal, and it was being talked about for a bit of time. This wasn't one of those, in an hour, Elon's going live. It wasn't one of those. I mean, they had been talking about it for at least a few days, right? I think I saw them talking about doing this for a couple of days. So I felt like we all had plenty of notice that this was going to happen at a specific date and time.
But it still managed to surprise Twitter.
Right. Exactly.
Now, this tweet that you found from Lex Fridman's quite interesting. We jumped on this one, didn't we, Madalyn?
Yes, and it's interesting how, well, it just seems like Elon is buddies with a lot of people on the right side. And it's a lot of these podcasters and live streaming people. And one of his pals, Lex Fridman, I'd seen this tweet that had been circulating around with this conversation. One of the things I love to do, Suze, I'm sure you do too, is watching Elon's replies to tweets, because you learn a lot about what Twitter is up to and what his thinking is based on just how he replies. So if anybody's paying attention to his tweets, be sure you always check his replies too. It's not always in his tweets in the feed. You want to go look at his replies as well. And interesting how Lex, the podcaster, is talking about, Twitter becoming more of a podcasting app, and talking about how Twitter is the best place for conversation on the internet. And I feel very strongly this is definitely the best place to go for conversations is Twitter. And again, not being political, I just take all of that out the picture. I'm here for the community. That's what Twitter is so great for. And I loved when Elon said, I recommend doing Twitter Spaces simultaneously and interacting with users dynamically while recording your podcast, as if this was a new idea that maybe nobody's thought to do. What did you think when you saw that?
I mean, there's an idea. Have we been doing it for, this is what did I say it was at the top of the show? Episode 95? That's like, yeah, we've been doing it for 95 episodes. So we're finding it's quite cool to do that. Yep.
Yeah, we came up with this quite some time ago. So, but not everybody thinks to do stuff like that. And I totally get it.
I did respond and invite Elon to, check out the podcast. And you explained that we've been doing it for just over 2 years and that it becomes a podcast from the live show. He didn't reply to either of us, which is rude, if you ask me.
It was rude. I was really hoping I'd hear from him. I just felt like I have this open connection to him. I'm like, surely he'll see my tweet. Dear Elon.
But it is a good idea. I love the fact that we get the chance to talk about this in like an open forum and then, really kind of condense it and create that and put it out again on a Friday as a version that is available in the podcast app. And for sure, we get live listeners who I'm sure only listen to us live right here. We see you every single week. I'm sure we get replay listeners because we get DMs from people. We get retweets from people, same people each time. So we've got a community and a listenership that just listen to the replay, which is fab. But we also do have stats. We have people listening on the podcast every week as well. Otherwise, there'd be no point in doing it. So we have hundreds of people that listen to the podcast every single week. So it's really interesting when you're, I guess it was a bit of an experiment to begin with, right, Madalyn? We were just like, well, if we can record this, then surely it's useful and we'll see what happens. I think it's proved itself, certainly to me. It's a small and niche community, but my goodness, we've made some really strong relationships with people. I really feel like we know our regular listeners, be they podcast listeners, replay listeners or live listeners. And that's really been the beauty of it. And the fact that we can then invite people to come and speak to us and actually have a conversation and join us on the show, if you want to call it. I don't know. I don't really think of it as a show. It is a podcast in the end, but I just kind of think of it as us lot all coming together on a Wednesday to have a chat, really. And hopefully that's the vibe people like. That's why people keep listening to it and enjoy it. But yeah, it's a great idea, Elon. You should definitely do it.
And then also we hear about another podcaster who is, coming over and utilizing Twitter for the podcast. That, another one of Elon Musk, I guess, political friends. I'm just trying to, again, try to be very neutral about all this stuff. But it just definitely seems very right-leaning with all these people coming over to utilize all these great features we have, audio and live streaming. We keep hearing that they're going to really increase the live stream capabilities. It's like you technically can still live stream on Twitter, but the quality's terrible. It's, the old Periscope. Which has been out of commission for a while, but they never took. Isn't that interesting? They never really took live video away. They never really made a big deal like we're taking Periscope away, but they didn't say, oh, you can't go into Twitter and do a live video. You've been able to all these years.
Yeah, it's more kind of just kept quietly running under the radar, I think. But I mean, taking the politics out of this, I think the running thread through this, whether it's Lex's tweet or this one about the Daily Wire's video podcast slate moving over to Twitter, is that we're hearing a little bit more again about actual podcasts on Twitter. So obviously before Elon took over, we had an audio tab that was showing, a range of pre-selected episodes from various podcasts. No one could quite work out where they were coming from or why they were selected. We never got that far, but it was certainly in beta. It was certainly used by a fair few people had it. And there were podcasts. You could sit and listen to your podcast in Twitter. And that was a thing that was being worked up and worked on. And then Elon came in and, we all know what happened next. And now there is no such thing. However, all of these tweets over the last few weeks that are sort of creeping in, we're hearing the word podcast again. And, I'm interested in this Daily Wire one from the point of view that what does this really mean? Like, how is Twitter hosting the Daily Wire's video podcast slate? And what does this mean for other podcasters? Are there going to be other podcasts that are brought onto the platform? Are they going to be specific podcasts? Perhaps from what we're saying here, maybe they will have a certain lean or a certain message that Elon wants to put out into the world. Equally, where does RSS fit into all of this, which is kind of what podcasters run on, right? And we want to know how our RSS feed's going to be ingested into the platform and what that's going to mean. So there's a billion questions around that. And using the word podcast every so often in all these different reports, do they really mean podcast? Do they mean content, audio content? Do they mean live spaces or live audio? Or it's really fluid over here on Twitter at the moment. And it's trying to work out whether they're really going to bring back that kind of, this is a podcast platform message, which is what we were hearing probably this time last year now, if not slightly before, or whether it's just a kind of amorphous generalisation of audio. So it's quite interesting from that point of view, I think.
It is, definitely. I mean, I'm a bit confused because in this article with Daily Wire, I'm not familiar with Daily Wire, but they keep saying podcast, but what they're doing is live streaming on their Twitter. But we also know there's a lot of podcasts that have a video version, and a lot of people are big on YouTube for podcasts right now. But I think the whole point is that Elon's trying to bring more media content to Twitter. He wants us to be utilizing spaces with live audio. He wants us to be doing live streaming or just getting more videos out there. He increased the video length to 60 minutes, up to 60 minutes if you are on Twitter Blue, a Twitter Blue subscriber. And he's talked about adding up to 2 hours of video content, having that ability. So it seems like he's just really keen on letting us do more media through Twitter versus what we were also used to for so long, which is just typing tweets, 140 characters, and it became 280 characters. And now, think about the long form we can do, audio, bringing back live streaming. It's an all-in-one, which is what we heard he wanted to do when he took over Twitter. Remember in the very beginning of all that, it's like the headlines kept saying that he wants to turn it into the everything app.
The one app to rule them all. And, certainly that's still what we seem to be seeing. I guess, yes, there's all of these different ways that he's adding into the app that people can get their messages across. I guess my concern is how influential he's going to be in terms of who he opens those platforms to and who he invites onto the platform because they have audio, video, etc., etc. So, yeah, Twitter's been in such an odd place this last year, and I really feel like we're still in a very strange place with all of it.
Agreed. It'll be interesting to see how all that starts unfolding. But so far, I'm just hearing about a very particular political group that is grabbing all the headlines of Elon and so live streaming, podcasting, whatever, exclusively on Twitter. It's just a lot of that going on right now. I don't know. We'll see what happens as we get further into the year. What do you think of the brand new voice messages in our DMs? Isn't that like the biggest exciting news in the past few weeks?
I mean, this is the biggest exciting feature that we've had in a while.
It really is. You and I have been talking about wanting this for quite some time. And before Elon took over, there was some talk. I remember Twitter talking about that this would be a feature coming soon. And then we just kept waiting and nothing.
And now here it is. And of course, the first ones that we both sent were to each other, which was obvious, I guess.
Of course, I had to send my first one to you. It was funny because, being the geek that I am, I remember, where I was and what I was doing when I got the feature. And it had already been available for several hours. So, of course, everybody's DMing me their audios. And they're waiting for me to do one back. And I'm like, I don't have it yet. And I was so bummed. And then all of a sudden, I'm on mobile and the thing pops up. I have a screenshot in this tweet here that's in the nest. It's like, introducing voice messages. I was like, yes. And so then that was the start of me, sending them out. And I'm like, well, who should I send my very first one to? Well, it just seemed like you were the perfect one to send that very first one to, and to let you know about, it's turned on, it's available, and then just waiting for everybody else to get it too. It was definitely an interesting rollout where it took about a day or two. I mean, it wasn't immediate for everybody.
Yeah, I had to wait. So I got your message and then I had to wait a couple of days before I could reply to you using a voice DM. I have to admit, I keep forgetting it's there.
It's already worn off. The newness is worn off. I keep, isn't it funny when there's a new feature and many of us are super excited and we go crazy? That first night, I mean, I was just doing voice DMs to everybody. I was like, because I was just so excited. And for the next few days, I was still, but then after about a week, I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot that I can do that now, until somebody does it to me. But it seems like it's worn off. The newness is worn off for a lot of other people too. Because you think like we'd all be still doing it a few weeks later, and it really dropped off.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd spoken about voice DMs and how they can be a little bit divisive, really. Like some people really love them and other people really hate them. It's a bit like Marmite over here. And I kind of get that. Like, I don't mind getting a voice DM, but I think it's WhatsApp that might be working on transcription for a voice DM, so that when you send a voice note, a transcript will go with it. So actually that person the recipient can see what's going to be in that voice note, and you can either then listen to it or read it. Because some people just don't know what's going to be in that voice note. They don't want to press play. They're not sure what it is. I mean, generally, hopefully those messages are going to be between people that know each other already. But every so often, you may well get a voice DM from someone that you don't know. Like over on LinkedIn, that can happen every so often. And if you don't know what the content of that is, then you might be a little bit apprehensive about pressing the button. So I think the idea of having transcripts alongside them is great. I think WhatsApp, Meta are looking at that. I think it's an additional thing over here on Twitter. We haven't had many new features over here for a while. It was fun. I forgot about it quite quickly. I probably will use it again in future, but I will probably be quite selective with who I use it with. And I haven't actually received that many back myself. So whether or not that's because people don't know that it's there or people just don't want to use it, not sure. But it'll be interesting when we open the mics. It'd be great to hear if anybody's gone crazy using voice DMs or really couldn't care less about them.
Well, I see Greg Luntz here live with us when we do our Q&A. I hope he can come up and share, because when I first got it available to me, he and I were doing voice DMs to each other, and he was doing some really interesting uses of it to help get attention, and it was brilliant. So maybe he'd like to come on and share with us in a little bit when we open up for the Q&A. But I always love hearing people finding really cool and interesting ways of using a new feature. But you're right that, not everybody is excited about this. Jason from Bunsen and Beaker was telling me recently that it's not working very well for him. They're getting a lot of awful audio DMs sent to them, because think about it. It can be a very anonymous platform. You can still be very anonymous on here. And if you got people that, want to troll around, he has a very large following. And I didn't even really think about like the dark side of having audio DMs. So he had expressed that the wish to be able to turn it off if you don't want to have it. And right now, there is no way to have it off or on. It's just defaulted on for everybody. So I do hope they give us the ability to turn it off, because if somebody's having a bad experience with it, especially with trolls, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, if it's anything like the message requests, then you want to be able to turn that off. I mean, I just don't even go in there anymore. It's gross. It's just awful. And why you should be subjected to that, really. And as you say, we've said how strong voice is as a connector, but equally that can also be really horrific if you play something that you're not expecting and it's an awful message. It still affects you in the same way that voice affects you in a good way, So you're right. It should totally be a toggle on off, or, do I want this on my account? Yes or no? That's something they should really think about.
Next up, Andrea Conway, who's on the design team at Twitter. She had created a voice tweet recently talking about, it was very meta. She's talking about the new audio DM feature and how great it is. And I'm listening to his tweet. I'm like going, my first reaction though, just listening to her talk about a new feature, the voice DMs, but she's using the audio tweet feature that, you and I were very big on, very, very bullish a few years ago, but it's just something not utilized. So she's using it to talk about the voice DM feature. Then she goes, I'm wondering why more people aren't using it. And it's like, I was just kind of like screaming at that tweet to her, even though she can't hear me, like, because y'all don't talk about it. You don't make it obvious you can do it. Like, it's one of those secret hidden features. If you don't pay attention, you will not even notice, if you're on an iPhone, if you're on iOS, that you can do an audio tweet. So you knew I had to go jump into that conversation. She didn't reply. I was kind of bummed.
I can give her 3 reasons straight off the bat. I mean, it's on iOS only, so that kind of cuts people out. You can't reply with a voice tweet. So someone voice tweets and you can't reply back using a voice tweet. Oh, and the card looks awful. Who wants that card with their picture in the middle of it? And you can't customize that in any way. There you go, Andrea. 3 things to go away and work on.
I spilled that out in this tweet. I mean, I was thinking, well, she really pays attention to people that respond to her. And I was thinking, all right, here's my chance. Let her know that, by the way, you and I were on this big mission to get other people using the feature a few years ago, that to the point that we created that 100-day challenge and we called it Voice 100. And, that was like when we first started this podcast series, All Things Audio. And you and I were really into this. And at one point, we had at least 25 people doing it with us because I was keeping track. It was a lot in this community. It was so much fun. We ended up doing about 30 days of it. I mean, it's hard. It's not as easy. Like, think about every day doing an audio tweet. There's one person I know who's been still doing it every day for a couple of years, is Jennifer Navarrete. I wish she could be here with us because I'm just so impressed with how she uses it. But I use this opportunity to tell Andrea that we love this, but we'd like to also be able to reply back with a voice tweet or quote tweet with a voice tweet. And please let the Android users have the feature too. So I was like, I really thought I'd hear back from her because she really seems to reply to pretty much everyone. And I got no reply. I was so bummed. So it wasn't. No Elon and no Andrea. So I struck out 0 for 2 with Twitter. So bummed.
This one is a really interesting thread that Jennifer, we've just mentioned her, but she actually brought to our attention during the week about from Tap for Nerd. And the tweet says, which space hosts do you think buy the most listeners? Now, there's a question, and it throws up 100 other questions as well. What did you think of this, Madalyn?
Oh my gosh. When I saw that tweet, I was like, huh? I was like, who is buying listeners for spaces? And I didn't even realize. It just shows you how I'm just I'm in my own bubble apparently, because I just had no idea that was a thing. So I was intrigued by this thread. So I have the first tweet in the thread, and then further down, I have another tweet because he turns into a thread on this second tweet because he's replying to somebody who's saying, how does this even work? I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking I'm talking to Twitter. I'm talking to the tweet. Like, yeah, how does it work? And Tap for Nerd fully explains some very rational thinking here that makes perfect sense. That there are services out there that you start your space, you send them the link, and 15 minutes later, they're going to have all these listeners come. And I'm thinking, why would you want to game the system like that? Like what's the point? It really just pissed me off as I was reading through this thread that like, wow, this is actually a thing and people are going to these lengths to try to look good.
I mean, it's an amazing thread with some extra long tweets in there, all of which, yeah, kind of blew my mind, really. I mean, as you say, perhaps we're just too firmly in the honest sort of section to think about the fact that people might buy people into a space. But in the same way, you know, people buy followers, people buy lists, all that kind of thing. I mean, I was really interested in the tweet that you then sent back, which included a link from Space's dashboard, which showed an amazing graph, which clearly shows two massive spikes in there. Do you want to explain it?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm reading back through this thread again today, preparing for this space, and I'm still intrigued. And I'm looking at the point he makes in the thread where he says, you know, analyzing the percentage increase between polling cycles of the participant count. And I'm like, oh, participant count. If I go to Space's dashboard, shout out to Andrew, who I see is here live. Hi, Andrew. I was like, oh, let me go take a look because I was in Space's dashboard earlier today, and I was going through collections, one of my favorite new features, and I came across this interesting space that Madalyn, I don't remember how to say her first name, had hosted yesterday called How Bots Are Weaponized on Twitter. And it showed it had 12,000 participants. I'm like, whoa, she had that many people on? So I thought, well, gosh, I missed out. Well, I like to go to Space's dashboard to see what was in the nest. You know, that was so great after a space ends, like the whole nest is intact. So I'm looking through the nest. I'm trying to gauge like what this conversation was about. Apparently, she's having a lot of issues with Twitter bots. So when I'm looking at the participant history graph in there, I'm like, oh, she's talking about how she's having a lot of problems with bots. They seem to be really attacking her lately. And she's calling them out in this space. So when you look at this graph, it's obvious that these two humongous spikes had to have been the work of these bots. So then it made me realize, well, if you just go into Space's dashboard and look for stuff like that, then it becomes really obvious when somebody, I don't think she paid for bots at all. I think she was, you know, she's talking about how she's attacked by bots. She's having a lot of bot issues. So whoever she's trying to call out was like, let me unleash a whole bunch of bots on this space and mess you up.
Or it'll be based on keywords. Like I actually worked out that when I was doing lots of voice tweets, you know, I was talking about voice tech and all of that kind of thing a few years ago. And there was a certain hashtag that whenever I used it, 3 accounts that were really random would always retweet it. I mean, they're clearly just there fishing for that particular hashtag, and I could guarantee they would send it out. And the reach on that tweet was apparently amazing, but that's not kind of the point. Like, I actually wanted some clear, real, honest engagement with people and some proper conversation, not just for it to be kind of splashed out here, there and everywhere. Yeah, so, you know, potentially, whether it's a hashtag or a keyword in a Spaces title or even in a tweet maybe that's being put in the nest, maybe that's calling, you know, triggering something in the back end. I don't know, but how these things work. But it's so clear on those graphs that when you called it out there, I was just like, oh my goodness, you can totally see that's happened there.
Yeah, I found it to be quite interesting. So I thought I got to share this today with everybody because you can go to that link and see exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I've got 2 more things that I want to cover before we open the mics, which we will do. Tristan, I saw you request earlier, so please do request again in a few minutes. The first one is this tweet from Ryan Hoover, which is about AirChat. Now, firstly, I'm really pleased to see a new standalone social audio app because we have covered an awful lot that have disappeared recently, whether that is from major companies like Spotify, whether it's major turnarounds and transformations like Clubhouse, or whether it's others that perhaps we were involved with that have completely disappeared. It's quite nice to see one that is a new one. So AirChat looks a lot like TikTok. It's got that kind of TikTok-y UI where you can flick through different cards to find things. I think the main thing about it is it's this kind of asynchronous social audio app. So it's not live. It is very much you leave a message, someone can then clip that, leave a message back. So almost it sort of sits somewhere between voice DMs and social audio, which is quite interesting. It reminds me a little bit about Soundwave, which was one of the early standalone social audio apps that I got interested in. Although that one is still, it's almost voice DMs and you answer a question and it's just your answer to it rather than trying to have a sort of audio conversation with others. So it seems pretty interesting. It's using AI to generate visuals, so there is a visual element to it as well. It's not just a kind of blank play card. And it also transcribes the audio. And because it's not live, it's got quite a good kind of AI transcription that can kind of process it because it's got more time to do that. So you get the text, which they're referring to as chits. You get the audio, which they're referring to as chats. And you can have both public and private conversations on there as well. So looks pretty interesting. Definitely one I'll be keeping an eye on. And just it's kind of nice to hear someone's trying to do something new again in social audio, because it has been quite a downward trend of sort of ticking them off the list recently, unfortunately. My other bit of news is about the podcast show, because Madalyn, I spoke to the Roadcaster man. So Madalyn was excited about the announcement that Rode are going to bring out a much smaller version of the Rodecaster Pro, which is what I use to record and broadcast into spaces on. They announced at NAMM earlier in the year that they were going to bring out a 2-channel version. And although they didn't have it there, the guy knew all about it. So yeah, it's a 2-input mixer with 4 pads, I think it's got on it. So you can preload your different bits of audio onto the pads. It's pretty neat, a little square that will just sit nicely in the corner of your desk. And he didn't have a price point for it. He literally just said to me, it's £150 less than your Rodecaster Pro 2, which I think still puts it at about $350 So I think it's still higher than I was expecting it to be, but not as expensive as the Rodecaster Pro. So that was super interesting to have a chat with him. Overall, at the podcast show this year, there was much, much less about video podcasts. In fact, there was not a single YouTube banner or icon anywhere, where last year they literally plastered the walls and you couldn't move for YouTube merchandise. This year, it was very much more about AI. We were hearing a lot about synthetic voice, about voice cloning, using AI like ChatGPT to generate show notes, to generate show outlines for podcasts, and also the AI that's being used for kind of audio plugins and how that's being used for background noise removal and all of those kind of things that are coming through. So that was really interesting to hear. I did write a piece in my Stop, Rewind, Play Substack, if you want to have a look at that, about the show and about the industry. It does also cover what I feel like was the major story that was missed by many of the industry publications, which is the massive gender pay gap over here in the UK between men and women in the audio industry, and how that has just gone bonkers since the pandemic, to the point that we're being paid even less now than we were then. And also the lack of sustained support for marginalised groups and diversity in the audio industry. So lots of pandemic promises, lots of things that were funded straight after the pandemic to give wider voice to people in the audio industry. Suddenly that funding's not available anymore, and we're not able to have the events and the support that we had previously. So all of that and lots more in the Substack. So please do head on over there and sign up and see what I had to say about it all. My goodness, we've got lots of speakers, Madalyn. Who's first?
We do. First up is Tristan. Hey, Tristan, how are you?
Hey, Dan. I did remember all those comments you made about the audio notes. I remember when we were doing, is it 2 years ago or is it 1 year ago? We were trying to do the 100 days. I managed a couple of weeks, I think maybe. And that issue of that they just didn't look very nice and you couldn't reply to them, and we were trying to figure out ways of replying, and that was a total pain. So it would be nice if they would bring that back. So that was the main thing, and I was interested to hear back from. I had too much work on, so I couldn't go to that day in London, though I had it in my calendar. There seemed to be, the only thing that I thought was a good supporting thing though from that was there seemed to be, I don't know on the day, but certainly the people who were tweeting about it and promoting beforehand, a lot more done for you services. So a lot more people who will support your company production and getting the podcasts and things out, or producing your audio, which potentially means there is that shift. Either people have come over from radio or adding it to radio, or just have started new, but maybe that supports a new growth of people doing audio because they can get the support, because they're good at speaking, but maybe they have no knowledge of the other piece. So maybe that brings through a new wave. Or maybe that goes away again, because I was sad to see the news that the women's podcasting event in America, they've had to cancel their event because the massive drop off in ad spend for podcasts. So they're going to do an online version, not a in person event. So yeah, that was me. Thanks for doing the show.
That's right. That's She Podcast Live has been taken to virtual, and the International Women's Podcast Festival, which was held in London here last year, has been cancelled completely due to lack of funding and support. So, it's a real issue. And yes, at the podcast show, there was many more sessions for creators. So they had 2 creator rooms this year, and you could hear from businesses and brands and individuals who had created podcasts and got to kind of hear how they were doing that and the different tools and different ways that they were doing that, as well as the big business sessions and the celebrity sessions as well. Whereas last year, we really felt like as creators, it was just for big business, and we felt kind of kicked out. If you're an indie podcaster, it wasn't really for you. This year, it felt a bit better. It could still be improved. And most definitely in terms of putting money where their mouth is, I mean, say less, do more is the hashtag we're using at the moment to get more attention, really, to the fact that this festival can't go ahead at all. And I think that is the key message to the big brands and businesses, because, you know, the presentation where we discussed the gender pay gap and the lack of support and funding had a limit on it of 30 people in that room, and I can almost guarantee that not one of them was actually from the big businesses that could have put some money up and supported it, which is a shame. So it was definitely different this year. I expect it will be different again next year, and it was just incredible, the difference between hearing everything about video podcasts last year and next to nothing about it this year. Was really interesting. And it was January 2022 apparently that we did the Voice 100, because I've just had a quick check. So it was a fair while ago that we were trying to get 100 voice tweets out in 100 days. That was a very big challenge I set for us.
And next up we have Maureen. Hi Maureen, how are you?
Hello, how are you? Glad to be here. I like attending your space, and I almost forgot it's like 7 minutes to 11 p.m. But really, this is refreshing, and especially hearing about, the tech issues. And I was just wondering, because I got in when you were talking about the audio. Then I was wondering, does Twitter have audio? I don't have an idea. And if yes, does it choose like the phones to, get the feature on? Yeah, so I'd like to get this from you. And again, I also love audios, especially when I open my WhatsApp and someone has sent an audio, I jump to it fast. So I think audio is really good. It's like having that person near without even seeing them. So that is really cool. So if we have audio on Twitter, I think it will be really fun, and I can't wait to use it. Although I've tried to look into my features and there is no audio. Yeah, and another thing I've heard us talk about ChatGPT. Okay, I Googled and then I used it. I think it was yesterday when I was asking it to, write a sentence about, good nutrition, something like that. And the answers were perfect, humanly perfect. And I was so happy. My worry is if you guys have used it much, I was worried about replication. Is there a chance where someone else could Google the same thing, could maybe write the same thing, and this chat thing give the same answers? I'm really interested in knowing that. Otherwise, I really loved it. I felt like I will soon stop thinking for myself and just use it. But then another worry is, can it maybe in future breed over dependence, especially, as young people, we love soft life and it brings good soft life. So really, thank you for the space.
Well, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So yeah, there's a lot to cover there. I will mention ChatGPT, and then maybe Madalyn, you can talk a little bit about audio tweets and where we find them. I was looking for my little video. I did do a video of it once, but I don't know that I can find it very quickly. ChatGPT. Yes, people are certainly using it for show notes, for taking their transcript of their podcast and plugging it into ChatGPT and chucking out a whole load of things that they might need for their podcast, whether that's social media posts, newsletters, show notes, all of those different things. I think with any of these tools, there is likely to be what I've found is that they can be quite formulaic. Like I've started to, when I'm doing my research for my newsletter and I add links in, I do kind of the same Google alert searches every single week. And I found this week, actually, there were 4 blogs that I completely knocked off the list because I almost felt like they were absolutely certainly come straight out of ChatGPT. They gave me, sentences that had 3 variations on things. They then broke down those 3 variations in the following 3 paragraphs. And then it ended with, in conclusion, and then summed it all up for me neatly at the bottom. And it was just too perfect and a little bit too pristine. And I'm fairly sure that, the one that it had written about audio AI, the one that was about sound design AI was pretty much the same thing. So I think it's great for using as a springboard, a platform, an idea generator, something to brainstorm from, a starting point, if you like. But in terms of just copy paste what it gives you, it's probably not the best idea. I mean, it totally cuts down time on various different elements of what you'll need to do for a podcast. But I personally think there's nothing like the personal human touch to really make sure that you're going to connect with your audience properly.
Yeah, I think it's going to be different. I think it's not going to always be the same. But who knows? I mean, yeah, it's interesting. When it comes to the audio questions, real quick, Maureen, do you have an iPhone or an Android? What type of phone do you have?
I have an Android.
Okay, so that's why you're not able to do that audio tweet feature that's been around for a couple of years. It's only available for iOS, so iPhone and iPad right now are the only ones that can do it. So when you go to compose a tweet in the Twitter mobile app, there's a little icon in there, a little purple waveform icon, and you tap on that and you can create an audio tweet. And we've never understood why they didn't add that for Android users. So that will explain that. What about the voice DMs? Are you able to do that on the mobile app? Because that should be for everyone on iOS and Android in the mobile app.
No, I don't have it.
Okay. I don't know if maybe it's because it's only been pushed out to just certain countries and not all countries. I don't know yet on that, but I have it here in the US. Suze, you're in the UK. I know people all over have been using it, but it's possible it has not been rolled out to all the countries around the world. So if you don't have it, the other thing though, just in case, make sure you have the most recent version of the mobile app on your phone for Twitter. Sometimes it's because you need the most current version, and that could possibly be it. If you do have the most recent version, and you still don't have the ability to do the voice DMs, then then it seems to me it's because it's just not available in your country yet. Hopefully that will change. Thank you so much for being here with us. Next up, we have Greg Lunt, and I'm really glad you're here, Greg, because you were doing some cool stuff with the voice DMs. You want to talk about that?
Hey, Madalyn. Hey, Suze. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I was doing anything too crazy innovative. I was just using them a lot. Like, I'm kind of reaching out to bigger accounts that have followed me maybe for a while or even in the last few weeks, and just kind of, I was kind of using the launch of the feature as an excuse to say, hey, did you see this new feature kind of thing, but also introduce myself and just humanize myself to them. I enjoy speaking, and I feel like, and some, the good thing is you can re-record those. I was just talking with a buddy of mine today actually, and he was like, I think there's power in the voice, but I really prefer the texting because it allows me to like think through what I'm going to say and like, put the effort into it and then send it. And I was like, well, the beauty of an audio note is that it's also asynchronous, right? So he had also expressed this desire to get better at speaking and build that skill. And so I think the voice notes are like actually an incredible opportunity to combine those two things, where you can just stop halfway if you don't like the way it sounds or you think you did something, and then you can course correct and hit cancel and redo it. And then that's actually how you practice and get better without putting yourself in like a live situation where you have to like practice your live speaking in front of an audience. And if you screw up, then it's embarrassing. You can just hit cancel. So I think the voice DMs are really powerful because you can build those skills, and you can also reach out to people and kind of, like I said, humanize yourself a little bit to them. So yeah, I had a couple other things, but I'd love to hear your take on that, Madalyn.
Well, yeah, I love that you mentioned the fact that we can, delete it and start over. And that's really powerful because many times when you have a feature to do audio like that, it's not. It's like whatever you record, when you record, that's it. I do like that. And it does give you the ability to kind of polish it, get it just right. Especially like I'd catch myself rambling and go, okay, hold on, I got to stop and start over. It's like I need to be a little more concise. But I just really liked how you were using a brand new feature to stand out to others. And that's what I just thought was so impressive when we both first got it and we were doing those voice DMs to each other once it was launched, that I just thought it was really neat that you thought of something that I guarantee you most people did not think to do. I was just sitting here doing the voice DMs to my friends, people I know. But whenever there's something new, using it in creative ways will help you stand out from others. So I just think it was just really smart. And by the way, you just launched a podcast. Congratulations. And I saw you were hosting a space yesterday, and then I saw you had the YouTube video. So are you just, tell me how you're doing this. Are you doing a podcast and then just promoting it by interviewing the guests in a separate space? Do you plan to just combine it all into one? Tell us how you're doing that, because I find it interesting.
Yeah, so I'm trying a lot of stuff, and I don't think I have everything figured out by any means, but here's what I'm doing. I'm recording a video podcast. So we jump on this app called Boomcaster. It's like a Riverside StreamYard kind of thing. Record the video. I create a video. I create a bunch of shorts around it. I create like a little hype trailer for it. I promote it a couple days before the episode, and then I do with a short and a little bit of information about the guest. And the day of, I'll put out a hype trailer and kind of links to the YouTube, Spotify, and Apple versions, and those audio versions will have like a different intro. Because you just have a different, like when you press play on a YouTube video, you need like a different experience. So I'm kind of like, if you guys are podcast veterans, which I know obviously you two are, but for the audience, like normally when you listen to a podcast, I've found that a lot of them start the same way. It's like a lot of pleasantries and, hey guys, here's the guest we have today. Here's the background on them. Or they even say like, they'll just start rolling and they'll be like, hey, like, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? And it's very like, kind of like it's everything's the same, and it's always you just start from the beginning, and it's like you work your way up. So I kind of just like have a coming up like little, thing in the YouTube video, like with a clip from the middle of the episode that's exciting or covers what I want to talk about. And then it cuts right into it. So my first question is like usually something that cuts pretty deep. And there's no like, hey, everyone, here's, this person today. So that's the YouTube video. But I think for the audio version, you do kind of want like that soft introduction a little bit. I do like a pre-recorded, monologue about the person for about 30 or 60 seconds. And then it cuts into the episode. So doing that. And then the day of, what I did was yesterday, as you mentioned, I did a Twitter Spaces where I just, and again, this can all change, but I'm doing like a listening party. So it's not really like a Q&A with the guest or an interview with the guest because they already did the interview. It's more like they just come sit on the stage with me and both our audiences will see us in there. We'll both promote it. We'll join. And then I just press play on the episode. So it's like when an album comes out and you have like those launch listening parties, like at the label and stuff. It's kind of like that. And we had about 50 people come through, which was pretty sweet. 50 concurrent. And then we had, I think like it was like 230 or something on the replay. So pretty good. And then I'm doing like an email newsletter I'm trying out too, experimentally, where I'm asking the guests like extra questions after the episode. And then those exclusive answers are in the newsletter, as well as like my take on them and stuff. But again, like I feel like the spaces and the email newsletter have a lot of, they might get cut, they might get changed, they might, they're fluid in terms of the creativity. But yes, I launched a podcast. I'm very excited about it. It's for creators. So that's kind of the theme. It's not just like you bring on the person and talk about whatever they're good at, because I feel like, again, that's every podcast. It's more like I do deep research on the guests. They're all established creators. And then I weave in kind of their experiences, their stories, and their perspectives into questions about how to create better content. So yeah, thanks for asking about it. And social audio is something I'm super passionate about, and that we talk about that in a lot of the episodes too.
I love that you're experimenting and trying these different things, but it sounds like the underlying theme is you started a podcast, and that's awesome. I like how you're utilizing spaces, incorporating spaces into that. And also, I put in the nest, you had put into the chat earlier that you voice DM every day and you're making serious connections from that. And I just want to remind everybody, it's so easy for us to be like in the mindset of, I'm going to push something out and it's just going out to the masses. This is a reminder that when you have that mindset of building your community one person at a time, you can really do wonders. And don't be afraid to just utilize these amazing features and just talk to people and not always make it all about, I'm just going to tweet, hope everybody sees it, but not doing some of this one-on-one. And I imagine, Greg, you're getting some amazing results by taking the time to voice tweet individual Twitter accounts every single day. That's awesome.
I've made a lot of really strong connections and taken connections of people that I've just been texting with and just elevated them instantly. But just to your point real quick, I just want to add this and then I'll let the next speaker go, is something that I just tweeted about. It's kind of adjacent to social audio, but just on the line of thinking about like trying new things and using new features and connecting with your audience. The last like 2 or 3 days, I've been sending a lot of video replies. So basically, like you can't record a video in a tweet, in a reply anyway, but you can record one on your camera roll and then attach it to a reply. So I'm seeing people on my timeline, again, people that like I admire or that have maybe bigger accounts or people that I want to get in front of. And they're tweeting something that I find interesting. And then I'll just whip open my camera roll and record like a 40-second selfie video talking about my thoughts on it. And then I'll post that as a reply. And it's getting like crazy good feedback. Just like I have like 100% response rate basically on them. And a lot of them are just like praising it, like, oh, this is so cool. No one does this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking like this is going to be like the meta in a couple of years. I think video replies are going to be like commonplace probably, even if it's like with avatar overview or something like that. But, you guys were talking about the voice replies, but I think at the minute, like if you have the courage to put yourself on video, I think this is something I'm going to continue doing a couple times a day at least. And the response has been really strong.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was on a mission. Suze, when was that? 2017, 2018. I was trying to get everybody to do video replies. And then I remember there was a hashtag that was born out of it. You became part of that group. That was like a spinoff from the group this community I started of just, did you know you can do a video reply in your tweets? And people were like, oh my God, I had no idea. This is a game changer. And, what was interesting, Greg, it was real easy to do years ago because it was just part of the camera in the Twitter mobile app. And then several years ago, they made a change to the camera inside the app and you could no longer do it. So the only way you could do it would be, like you said, you have to record the video on your phone, so it's in the camera roll, and then add it into your tweet. So a lot of people stopped doing it. Even I kind of stopped doing it because it just was too many steps. Well, they put the camera back, so you should be able to do it. The problem I have with it is it doesn't stabilize, so it's super, super shaky, and I hate that. So I've kind of gotten back into doing video replies again, but I'll just record it on my phone while I'm out walking my dog and just make a video and then just use that to tweet it and just bypass the camera itself. Because when you hit reply, a lot of people don't realize this. When you hit reply to a tweet, when we're done with this space in just a minute, go to your notifications, go find a tweet from somebody you know and like, and go, you know what, I'm going to video reply back to them. You will blow their minds. You will freak them out because nobody does this. Apparently Greg does, which is awesome. And you hit reply this is for mobile, on the mobile app. When you open that reply, tap as if you're going to send a picture, but instead tap on the camera so it opens up and you can actually do a video. But in my experience on an iPhone, it's super shaky. But just try it. And if it's too shaky for your liking, then just record it straight out on your phone and then just go in the camera roll when you hit reply and do it that way. We ought to get back into that mission again. More audio on Twitter and do more video, and you'll definitely see lots of results. Thank you, Greg, so much for sharing all this with us. We've definitely gone over time today, but this was some gold information worth sharing. So I hope you guys will play around with this, spend more time with the voice DMs, get in that mindset of building your community one person at a time, one profile at a time, and just be consistent like Greg is doing. So thank you, Greg, for sharing all this with us. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.